May 1943. A train carrying 500 German prisoners of war rolls into Amarillo, Texas. On the platform stands a real cowboy, leather chaps, wide-brimmed hat, rolling a cigarette in the desert sun. These men are Afrika Korps veterans. Captured at Tunisia and Sicily, they fought under Rommel. They expected to die in the desert, different outcome. Nazi propaganda was clear. Americans are mongrels without culture, soft, decadent, cowboys and gangsters. In captivity, expect barbarism, torture. Animals don't follow the Geneva Convention. The first shock came on the transport ships. White bread, real coffee, 3 hot meals a day. More food than German soldiers had seen in months, the same rations American GIs received. One prisoner later wrote, "The Americans have so much of everything, they even share it with their enemies." Built for 4,800 prisoners. What they found: barracks with electricity and indoor plumbing, hot showers and flush toilets, luxuries many didn't have back in Germany, 80 cents per day in wages, the same rate as American privates. 3 substantial meals, daily mail from home, recreation privileges, canteen access. The camp commander's rules were simple: work 8 hours, follow regulations, cause no trouble. Unterfeldwebel Friedrich Becker couldn't process it. Wages, they're paying prisoners. Next morning, they met their work supervisors, not soldiers, ranchers, cattlemen, cotton farmers in worn denim and leather boots. American boys were fighting in Italy, preparing for France. Texas cotton stretched for thousands of acres. Without workers, it would rot. Rancher John Davidson needed 40 men for his fields. He walked over to the strongest Germans, extended his hand, and introduced himself. In Texas, men shake hands before working together. Oberfeldwebel Wilhelm Müller stared at that hand. 6 months ago, he was shooting at Americans in Tunisia. Now one wanted to shake his hand like an equal. He took it. Davidson's grip was firm, calloused, a working man's hand. The work was brutal. Bent backs, bleeding fingers, 100-pound sacks under the Texas sun. But something extraordinary happened. German prisoners worked alongside Mexican migrant workers, black sharecroppers, poor white tenant farmers. The racial hierarchy the Nazis preached crumbled. Everyone sweated the same. Everyone's back ached the same. Everyone drank from the same water bucket. At noon, the ranch cook Rosa Martinez rang the dinner bell: beef stew, cornbread, sweet tea, apple pie. Rosa didn't speak German, the prisoners didn't speak Spanish, but she ladled extra portions and smiled. Food is a universal language. Vera Hartman would remember that meal forever, not for the food, but because a Mexican woman treated German prisoners with the same kindness she showed everyone else. The Third Reich said this was impossible. The Third Reich was wrong. Camp McLean, near Amarillo, real cowboy country. Rancher Thomas Anderson surveyed his new workers: Luftwaffe pilots, Panzer crews, U-boat sailors. Not one had ever seen a cow up close. He sighed. This is going to be interesting. He started with basics: how to approach a horse, how to hold a rope, how not to get kicked, bitten, or trampled. The Germans were terrified. The animals were suspicious, mutual distrust at first sight. But Anderson was patient. His own son was flying B-17s over Germany. These boys were someone's sons, too. Within weeks, magic happened. Hauptmann Erich Schmidt became Anderson's best horseman. He could rope, brand, and doctor cattle with the best of them. At night, he sketched the landscape: mesas at sunset, longhorns against the sky, cowboys and Germans working side by side, images impossible anywhere else in the world. December 23, 1944. Camp Papago Park, Arizona. 25 U-boat sailors emerged from a 178-foot tunnel they'd spent 3 months digging. The plan: float down the Salt River to Mexico, wait for Germany to win the war. They had maps, a collapsible boat, saved food, everything ready. Kapitän Leutnant Hans Werner Krauss led them into the Arizona desert under a full moon. Freedom. They ran toward the river and stopped. The salt river was bone dry, not a drop, just sand and rocks. Their maps were from the 1880s, before the dams, before irrigation. Within days, they were recaptured, sunburned, dehydrated, ready to return. One was found at a Phoenix gas station. The attendant, an old man named Pete, gave him water and a sandwich, then called the authorities. While they waited, Pete shared his coffee and talked about his own son in the Pacific. Two father's sons, one lost in the desert, one lost in a war. Christmas Eve, 1944. A handful of German POWs sat in the back pews of a Texas church. The congregation sang Silent Night, Stille Nacht, originally German. The prisoners knew every word. By the third verse, some were crying, not from sadness, from the shock of being treated as human beings in an enemy land. Sunday services became regular. American chaplains provided German hymnals and prayer books. Lutheran ministers and Catholic priests among the prisoners led worship. Freedom of religion, even for enemies. Friedrich Becker wrote to his wife in Hamburg, "The Americans are not what we were told. They have given us warm clothes and good boots. We eat meat every day. I am saving my wages. When I come home, we will have money." He didn't mention the abundance that surrounded him, the cars every farmer owned, the electric lights burning all night, the stores packed with goods. How could he? She wouldn't believe him. The censors wouldn't let it through anyway. Back in Germany, families suffered through Allied bombing, stood in ration lines, hadn't seen meat in months. The cognitive dissonance was crushing. May 8th, 1945. V.E. Day. Germany surrenders. In Camp Herne, prisoners listened to the radio in silence. Their country was gone. The 1,000-year Reich lasted 12. Everything they fought for was ash. But something else had been born, in the cotton fields, on the ranches, in the churches. Understanding. Friendship, a different future. That night, John Davidson brought pre-war bourbon to the camp. He shared it with Wilhelm Müller and the Germans who'd worked his fields. They drank to the end of war, to the dead on all sides, to whatever comes next. Müller told him, in English, no translator needed anymore, that he wanted to come back when he could, if he could. America had shown him something Germany never did. That strength doesn't require cruelty. That power doesn't demand hatred. That enemies can become friends over cotton fields and cattle drives. Repatriation began in 1946. Trains reversed their journey, ships to Europe, back to rubble. But the Germans carried something more powerful than military secrets, knowledge. They'd seen how Americans farmed, organized, worked. They understood American abundance wasn't magic. It was methods, machinery, management. Things that could be learned, copied, adapted. More importantly, they knew Americans, real ones. Thomas Anderson teaching them to ride. Rosa Martinez ladling extra stew. John Davidson shaking their hands. Pete giving water to an escaped prisoner. When they told these stories in Germany, no one believed them. But by 1950, immigration laws changed. Former prisoners could return. They boarded ships in Hamburg and Bremen. Not as prisoners this time, as immigrants. A former Africa Corps sergeant returned to Texas in 1951. John Davidson was waiting at the station. Same handshake, stronger grip. His English was perfect now, Texas accented. He sounded like a cowboy. He married a local girl, opened a machine shop fixing tractors. His son went to Texas A&M to study agriculture. His grandson served in Afghanistan, U.S. Army, 82nd Airborne. Another returned to Arizona. Thomas Anderson had work waiting, the best horseman he'd ever trained. Eventually, the man bought his own ranch, 500 acres near Tucson, raised quarter horses. His neighbors knew his story. They didn't care. In Arizona, you're judged by how you work, not where you're from. Even one of the Papago Park escapees returned legally, opened a business in Phoenix, not far from where he was captured. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Decades later, former POWs returned to visit the camps. They brought photo albums, young men in Wehrmacht uniforms learning to pick cotton, learning to rope cattle, learning their enemies were human. At one reunion, an elderly rancher stood to speak. "You boys came here as enemies. You left as friends. You came back as family. That's the American way. That's the cowboy way. That's the human way." The applause lasted 5 minutes. Former enemies embracing, not a dry eye in the room. 425,000 German POWs in America. 700 camps across 46 states. Millions of dollars in agricultural labor, saved 5,000, eventually returned as immigrants. But the real story isn't in statistics, it's in transformations. Nazi soldiers becoming Texas cowboys, enemies becoming neighbors. Hatred dissolved by hospitality, propaganda shattered by simple human kindness. From Camp McLean, one prisoner wrote to his mother, "The Americans are cowboys, just like Goebbels said. But he never told us cowboys could be kind. He never told us they would share their food, their skills, their humanity. He never told us they would teach us to ride horses and shake our hands. He never told us the truth about anything. The truth was simpler and more profound than any propaganda. In the dust of Texas cotton fields, the mesa shadows of New Mexico, the desert sun of Arizona, German prisoners learned the most dangerous lesson possible for a totalitarian ideology. They learned their enemies were human, and that they were too. They came as warriors of the Third Reich. They left as cowboys,